Hello and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened, where we discuss, explore, and connect with fellow empaths, healers, intuitives, and seekers. Hello, empaths. Welcome to the show. We hope your week is off to a great start. We have our astrologer friend, Jen Edwards, back on the show with us, and we're going to talk about some astrological trends coming up for you in the next couple of months. First, let me remind you about Jenifer Edwards. She is a Maine-based Imramm Astrologer, Cartomancer, and Reiki III Practitioner whose real mission is to assist others in discovering their soul's purpose through their unique astrological fingerprint, their birth chart, which she believes is a soul map of our journey in this lifetime that includes our challenges that we're here to master, as well as the blessings which are here to guide and enhance us during our experience. I love that description. Welcome back, Jenifer.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we are too. Can you start us off by just kind of giving an overview of this recent eclipse season we went through in the end of September, early October, that maybe possibly helped clear the path for us for some things coming up?
Well, these were really exciting eclipses that we just moved through. In fact, yesterday was the solar eclipse in Libra, which is the final eclipse in the Libra series until 2030. And these eclipses were about deregulating our self-worth, what we show up for that is not worthy of self, and what we have been afraid to really step into after we have claimed our self-worth. That's mostly what the Libra eclipses are showing is creating harmony within the harmony of yourself, not through the disharmony of self. And Pisces started this season on September 17th with the first eclipse in Pisces in about 9 years. The North Node will be moving here, and this is actually bringing in intuition and source to help guide you in your movement rather than fear-based sort of patterning and behavior where we have the liberation of listening to our intuition, where we can be guided in that way. And this is really creating a platform to move into the next 6 months of playing with that, of putting on the training wheels, of, going two steps forward in trust and having that little bit of a safety net to go backward to safety where you feel confident enough to continue forward in the trust. So this is a beautiful opening of removing a mask of an old identity so you can kind of create the dance of the Pisces source vortex in your creation moving forward.
I think that's really hopeful because there's a lot going on in the world right now. And what you're saying, the abridged version in my mind is it's time to look within, see who you really are, accept who you really are, and do this last little legwork to get ready for these shifts that this is instituting energetically.
Absolutely. And the shifts that this is really bringing in is a deeper trust that you are worthy, that what you are experiencing is real. Your feelings are valid. They are validated, and they need to be validated by yourself first. And so ultimately, when we validate ourselves, we can create just about anything, and we connect deeper with the world around us. And I think that you will find that once the eclipse series of Pisces and Virgo commence in 2026, when they're over, I think you'll find that there will be a deeper sense of purpose and awareness as a collective, where right now it feels uncertain, but that is because we haven't made space for ourselves to be seen.
Okay, let's get a little real though. We've got Mercury retrograde coming up at the end of November, right before Thanksgiving and all the holidays in December. What is that going to look like for us?
Well, what we have coming up right now is the time to really get things situated, settled. If you're planning on taking a trip in the spring, you're going to want to, if you're able to book those things in advance prior to the the full moon on November 15th in Taurus. And this is because we begin a back-to-back retrograde cycle beginning on November 25th. And it starts with Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius will happen between November 25th and December 15th. And then Mars retrograde overlaps this. Mars retrogrades every 2 years, so this is not something that's common. But Mars will retrograde from December 7th to February 27th. And then Venus will overlap that beginning March 10th. So for that first portion, we're really looking at what we have created before in the past from an old thinking pattern that no longer serves us. It's kind of like waking up and realizing you've always been told to be afraid of ants, so you've just always been afraid of ants, and so you've never done anything if ants have been around. And now you're liberated and you're not afraid of that anymore. And you realize, oh, I can do this now. I can do that now. So it's kind of a rectifying of old fear-based movement into the liberation of the world is opening up as my oyster because, ants are nothing to be afraid of. So that's really what this winter is going to look like. I see the time being best used with communing with family, with really understanding your family roots, where things have come from traditionally within your family, and whether they serve your purpose and where you are right now. Also, deeper connection within self, why we create the things that we create. That's really what's going to be on the table as we move into the late winter, early spring. And then as we continue into the springtime, Mercury will retrograde again because it does this every 3 months, but it will happen while Venus is retrograde. So it is going to give you the trust to be able to create after the equinox and the spring eclipses into taking chances. If 30 years ago you chose an office job out of safety and security and did not choose the artist job that completely lights you up, you may have the training wheels to be able to choose that direction forward without fear. And that's really what this is, stepping up to the plate, because our purpose is it's not a title or a hat that we wear. It's actually our sole purpose is to create in our truest frequency that we are born with. And so ultimately, we are being recalibrated into that place. And collectively, it will be a safe place to do so because there's so many of us that are aware and alert and creating space for this as we continue down this path together.
So a lot of people are really comfortable and familiar with Mercury retrograde. What would be the Astrology for Dummies Mars retrograde? Like just real little snippet of, because we know that, oh, this is going to happen, my electronics, your increased sensitivity and psychic abilities during a Mercury retrograde. But since it only happens every couple of years, it's right in that holiday cycle. Are there any things that we should be aware of that we could be proactive with that retrograde coming?
Absolutely. So with Mercury, just so everyone is aware, Mercury is how we think, communicate, and comprehend. So we're always redoing that, obviously, several times of the year. Mars is our baseline frequency of creation, which means how we create in a subconscious way as we move our body. And so when Mars retrogrades, we look at, were we creating from baseline fear to control things, or were we creating from baseline flow to go without resistance, those sorts of things? And so Mars, when it retrogrades, it looks at the hows and whys we have created over the last 2 years since the last retrograde. And it recalibrates you into a deeper, more distilled sense of movement that's more in alignment with your intuition, your higher self. So that way you can create foundations at a more authentic and transparent baseline, which ultimately is the framework of the universe, or universal consciousness, is truth and transparency.
Wow. Okay. See, I was thinking Mercury retrograde is communication stuff. Mars retrograde can be old fights resurfacing. So I was thinking about those two joining forces at the holiday dinner table.
Yes, and they can because Mars is also the condition of your ego. And we all need ego to survive. So ego is not a bad word, but if it's broken ego, then there's right fighting, there's controlling, there's speaking over people. And one of the things that I tell my people in the Moon Lodge is that if you have to speak loud for someone to hear you, that means you're not hearing yourself. And so Mars is going to recalibrate what we are creating, what we are controlling, and where that actually comes from. So that way, when it goes direct, we've ironed out all those kinks, all of those resentments are off the table. And resentments will be a huge cycling out because Mars is going to start retrograding in Leo, which is the sign of the playful ego, but also the playful child, and move retrograde into Cancer, which is emotional resentment, can be emotional manipulation, but it's also wanting to be nurtured. And so one must nurture themselves first, and then they can nurture the outside world and vice versa. So that's ultimately what that Mars is going to teach us. In terms of 3D, how it will play out, a lot of repressed emotions. But, repressed emotions, when they are processed and aired out, what comes to light is healed, right? So there's going to be a lot of, community by the time this is over with. Things that have held you back, resentments, fears. I have a Cancer rising. I love working with people who have Cancer placements, but the thing is that we tend to bury the hatchet, but we never forget where it's buried, right? And so this is really the time to let bygones be bygones through emotional process. So when Mars is healthy and direct, we can create from a much more stable baseline than ever before.
Okay, I brought this up on other times when you've been on the show with us, that astrology is not my strong suit. It fascinates the hell out of me, but it doesn't pertain. It's just, I don't know why. But what is really interesting is that everything you're saying aligns with what's been coming through intuitively for time frames. That October is a huge time of shift. There's going to be a lot of shift and change. It's been coming up for probably the last 8 to 10 months. In October, there's going to be a good shift, and it's not dependent on it's not just a generic thing. It's very much specific to what's coming through in a reading. So that feels really important. The timeline is October to right before Thanksgiving. And then the second timeline, which kind of aligns with what you're saying with this retrograde, is after Thanksgiving into the first of the year. So those seem like they align with the retrogrades that you're talking about. Are there any other things people could be aware of to really use this time to their benefit? Because it sounds like it's a time rich with releasing, with letting go, with coming back to self, all of those things. But the way you described it, the way it interpreted in my brain was take care of your stuff now over these next couple of months and really get clear on who you are and what you're ready to release, what you're ready to move forward with. And then in the spring, it's going to give you that time to really start to plant those seeds. Is that kind of close?
It's absolutely close. Moving forward after yesterday's eclipse, we aren't quite done yet. And so what I mean by that is that new moons and full moons are connected in 6-month cycles. So the next lunation that we will have in 13 days will in fact be the full moon in Aries at 23 degrees, which is directly connected to the Great American Solar Eclipse on April 8th of this spring. And both of those moons were in a conjunction to Chiron in Aries, which is the wounded healer. It's the wounded child. It's liberation of the wounded child, getting rid of an old identity that we've hid behind so we can play, so we can create and play. So what you're going to find over the next month and a half, especially through October, what's left of October, we're at the beginning of the month, but what's left of October and into November is setting the stage of putting those training wheels on and trying new things. And if things don't work out, it doesn't matter. It's not a part of your worth and value. Holding on to things that aren't working because we're afraid to let go is a reflection of your worth and value. So we'll start to have those things open up. So what I suggest is take the chances now, start the LLC now, It'll have a healthy birth chart. Everything will be direct in terms of inner planets. And if you have to modify things, do it during the retrograde time of the late winter, early spring, when you are looking at it at a fresh new set of eyes. So we can establish risk taking. What I love about Aries energy is that it's spontaneous. And, one of my mottos is that I'm definitely winging something I shouldn't be winging, And so, sometimes it feels like, what am I doing? But really what it's doing is it's allowing me to take chances in growth where I'm not bound to safety. And so if you've ever thought about, taking that trip or pulling the trigger on something, I would do it now, and then whatever needs to be modified in terms of details, classification, that type of thing, would happen in the spring. So say the thing, say the thing, declare the thing, ask for the thing. The worst thing you're going to get is rejection. And what I tell the group is rejection is the best thing that could ever happen to you, because now you can move on from something that you've been stuck to. And honestly, these cycles are giving us the courage to be direct around places where it's been safer to be indirect. And ultimately, that's where the breakthrough is going to happen this fall into winter, the solstice in December on the 21st.
So then we're heading into then we're heading into Venus retrograde after the holidays, which in my simplistic understanding of astrology means don't get a haircut or try a new makeup style.
Yeah.
What else does Venus retrograde mean?
You definitely don't want to try your own bangs until, maybe May, but
Should you
Venus
ever try
retrograde.
your own bangs?
Oh my God, no. Venus retrograde really has to do, in the most simplistic way, in the 5D value, has to do with our worth and value and everything that meets us due to that. So if we resonate at a low worth and value feeling wise, we will always have things show up to pull us out of that so we can get into our truest self-worth and value to reclaim it. So Venus rules love, money, so prosperity, security, as well as self-worth and value. And when she's retrograde, which she will be retrograding in the signs of Aries and Pisces, she is looking for unconditional love within ourselves to reclaim that, to create on the outside world. So we would start to see relationships that have not served us in an emotional level to be reevaluated. Our relationship with ourselves to be reevaluated. The energy that we put into work or employment, whether that's really something that's solely safety and security, if it has any soul value in it, it's going to be looked at again to be removed if it's not. So when we have the retrogrades of Mercury, then Mars, then Venus, those three planets are our 3D avatars to create from the divine, I guess you'd say, right? On this planet. So they're being recalibrated for us to be able to create in self-worth and value, which creates prosperity and love. Our baseline frequency through Mars is through flow and not force. And the mind being clear of self-doubt because we feel our feelings. It doesn't gas the mind up into rumination. So by the time Venus goes direct, it's almost as if Venus's planet, our higher octave planet, is Neptune, which is unconditional love. So she's basically realigning with that, and if we all look back when we were a kid, when was the last time you felt unconditional love? And so it's really bringing us back to that feeling to create with moving into the spring eclipses, the equinox. And then ultimately, when Venus goes direct on April 12th, which is going to be the full moon in Libra, which is connected to yesterday's eclipse and rules Libra, she's born brand new and into unconditional love. So in terms of like, well, Jen, what can I do in terms of around the house? This is looking at redecorating. This is looking at, maybe giving away old clothes that you've been holding on to, basing your identity on whether you fit into them again. This is looking at, what really serves unconditional love for yourself and what does not resonate with that. And whatever doesn't resonate with that, we can let go of. And that can look like homes. This can look like jobs. This can look like our attire. It can look like our relationships. And those things that if, we tend to move in a different direction, it will all be it will all be amicably done and also done with, unconditional love for everybody involved, which
So,
ultimately that's where the best change comes from.
so if a lot of what you're saying is about realigning with your self-worth,
Yeah.
finding that self-love, taking the risk and saying, I'm going to do this. A lot of people right now are at crossroads with big decisions in their lives, whether to move, whether to commit to a relationship, whether to change their career. How do these retrogrades impact? Is there a time frame or a planetary influence that is saying, because yes, I agree, jump, be brave, do what you need to do, keep moving and evolving, keep growing, keep learning. But are there any cosmic red flags that are saying, okay, you'd be better off to make the big decision? And what's popping into my head is I have a friend who is trying to figure out a financial situation and about whether to stay in a certain job or move into something different. And from what you're saying right now, and there is self-worth and stuff involved in that, there's a lot involved. What would be a timeline to take that jump? To say, okay, enough is enough? Is it better after all these retrogrades or dead ass in the middle of them?
Well, I'm gonna start my reply with a quote that I wrote down because it's quite fitting. But it's hard to hear the voice of the intuition when you already have decided what you want it to say.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, whenever we make big decisions and they're from the right place, like especially if they're financial, I'll use employment because that's often a difficult one, even for myself. When we are looking at making big changes because we're suffering at work, but we need to pay for things in real life. And we don't want to make a mistake and lose the 10 years that we've already invested, but we weren't happy back then. You can't make a wrong move when you are in service to your intuition. However, what I will say is that for people who do make moves from the right place because they just can't do this anymore emotionally, when we get into the retrograde period, things are not going to move fast. So if you are in the camp of poking something with a stick to prove that you're going to be okay, this is what this retrograde is going to heal within you, that you don't have to poke things with a stick. So things aren't going to come to completion really, really fast. So if you're a 1 foot in and a 1 foot out person, um, this is going to be a time where when you finally get to the end of the retrogrades in the spring, you will be able to make the full step to the other side. For some people during this period, if you are 2 feet in one place and really don't want to be there, it's time to put 1 foot on one side and have the other foot on the other side. Okay. So that way you have the baby step of I'm creating my resume. I know I don't want to be in this other place, but I'm putting energy into another place that may be more fulfilling financially and emotionally in all ways, but I still have the safety of the other foot here. So this could look like reducing hours and making more time on the other side for something that you want to create. A lot of people in my sphere are leaving, corporate America and wanting to move into their healing modality. And the way that I did that was I did the 1 foot in and the 1 foot out, where I lowered my hours in the public service field, and then increased my hours in the joy that I wanted to create for myself, and in that created the space for that to grow. So if we don't create space for something we want to grow, it can't come in. So to answer your question, uh, If you haven't made any structured movement towards creating your goals because you're afraid to take the jump, move one foot in that direction to create space for it. If you are someone who's straddling the line already, you will be ready to jump both feet first, moving into the spring, if not before that. Things are not going to move fast over winter and spring. So poking it with a stick is going to be, when we're anxious, we're like, when is this going to happen? It's going to teach a lot of people the power of surrender to the unknown, which, is difficult. But when it happens, boy, is that trust.
But on the other side of it, you'll have done the internal work to be ready for the transition.
Absolutely. And really, if you look back to 2020, the universe has been getting us prepared for this in increments over the last 4 years, whether you realize it or not. You can't take a container and try to fill it to the brim when it's not ready for it. And so we're ready for this. And when it sounds a little bit mystical and not concrete, and maybe a little out there to think absolute trust in yourself. But I mean, when was the last time you had absolute trust in yourself and your intuition? Something that I tell the people in the Moon Lodge group is that, your intellect, your mind can only be 99.9% accurate because of probability. And your intuition in hindsight was always 100% correct. And if you were walking in Maine down the street and your intuition said, there's a rattlesnake, your brain would pipe in and say, this is zone 4. There are no rattlesnakes, right? So you continue and you get bit by a rattlesnake. And that's because your brain isn't, the probability of someone letting one go in the woods never existed. So when we start to actually take baby steps, 2 steps forward, 1 step back with that cradle of safety, we start to really work and trust with our intuition. And that becomes, when we trust our intuition, we trust a lot about ourselves. We trust a lot about ourselves.
I liked that quote you shared. It's hard to listen to your intuition when you already know what you want your intuition to say. That was fantastic. So after we've gone through these retrogrades and we've done all this inner work and focused on our self-worth and what we want to create, what's coming up for us that is going to really help birth this into the world?
Well, the eclipses of Pisces and Virgo are incredibly special. And, they do happen every 9 years, but the transit north node takes 19 years to return to a sign. So for instance, the north node of collective fate is sitting at 4 degrees Aries. And last time we had eclipses in Aries and Libra, with the north node there would have been 2004 through 2006. So the last time we had eclipses with the north node in Pisces, which the north node enters Pisces on January 11th, 2025, would have been 2006 through 2008. Whenever we have the north node in Pisces, Pisces is the sign of the higher or inner self, source, if you will. It's the ruler of the 12th house of the astrological wheel, which is where we connect with source before we are reborn again into the first house of identity and self in Aries. So we are taking the masks off of who we thought we needed to be that actually sacrificed our happiness in the process and our self-worth in order to accomplish for everyone else, and moving away from those masks of self-disharmony into creating the dance with source, the intuition. So Pisces is source and intuition. Virgo is boots on the ground. It's taking that 5D and creating it in the 3D. So Virgo is creating a tangible healing in the world within, in the world without, to create in the material world from a much more enlightened perspective. And so when we talk about enlightened perspective, what does that mean? It means that we realize that we're all connected. It means that we realize we're all sentient beings. It means that we have compassion and empathy for everyone, because we have compassion and empathy for ourselves. And the reason why I kind of highlight that is because Pluto is moving into Aquarius for the next 20 years on November 15th. And when Aquarius moves there, last time Pluto was in Aquarius was 1777 until 1798, which was 248 years ago. But it brings us in this day and age to a collective consciousness that there's so much power for the people, to the people, for the people. If you build in love with a whole collective, that's the vibration we're building off of. And you can go back to the big Cornell study that was done in the 70s, where they had people, people meditate in groups of 20 to 100 in Chicago and lowered the crime rate in a year. It's understanding that our power as a collective and our attention as a collective, wherever it goes, is what exists. Because if you don't want something to exist, you just don't pay attention. You cut off the frequency to it. So if we want power to the people, do we want power to the people that are not healed and don't see things as sentient beings, or do we want us to all heal collectively and create that safety for each other? So back to the original question, Pisces Virgo eclipses is the great healing of the collective to move into a connected stream of consciousness where all lives matter. And you know, nothing is better than that.
Yeah, I agree.
I was just thinking about the energies right now. There's a strong need for community, the collective. A lot of what you've shared has been really focused on how you can work with yourself, but that is also going to be reflected in this collective energy as well. So the more work, the old adage, you raise your vibration and frequency, it's going to help someone else raise theirs. It's going to bring us together in collective. But the community part is, I do think that there, and this is intuitive, so I'd love the astrological reason for this. Intuitively, there's a strong feeling that people are aligning with familiarity, with people who share the vocabulary, people who share their ideology about different things. Doesn't matter if it's yours or someone else's or right or wrong. But is there going to be a time period during all of this where, prior to this collective consciousness coming together? Because I think love is the answer. I think seeing the human being for who they are is the answer. But my gut feeling is there's going to be a blip in the screen before that can happen. Like people are going to really align in community to try to make it their way, if that makes any sense.
Yes, when you become emotionally available for yourself, without judgment, self-pity, without criticism, without emotion, without intellectualizing your emotions. So when you feel your emotions all the way through, and you do that before creating action, you allow and liberate someone else to do that as well by virtue of doing that. So it's not selfish. It is actually a selfless act to be vulnerable and feel all of your feelings before creating movement to not avoid them. That creates a collective awareness that it is okay to be seen for who you truly are, bandages and all, imperfections and all, so we can hold each other in beauty and grace. The eclipses of this, you're going to see that dam burst during the eclipses of the Virgo lunar eclipse in March, as well as the final Aries eclipse, a solar eclipse in March. The reason being is because there are a lot of people holding back, and this is from generational wounding. I mean, I come from a generation where I'm in the in-between. I come from the suck it up, buttercup, and get things done. And, you know, and then also my other foot is in the new generation that, you know, is really self-aware. And so a lot of the people that I'm guiding over that bridge are the ones that have a lot of shame and self-worth issues in admitting that they have feelings, having fears of failure. And so for those people, the ones that are on the other side and have done the have become emotionally available for themselves and felt the feelings all the way through and trust the process, which, dark nights of the soul or something else, are ready to hold the ones when the dam gets ready to break, and they come to the other side because they're ready. They're ready. That old identity that that they've been trying to maintain, is something that's gone on through the whole entire lineage. And we are now in a place and time where we're not going to die if we don't, plow the fields in mid-August. Okay. And, that's a completely different set of genetics as we're moving into a space where we have the time to look at our feelings. Could you imagine, asking my grandfather was a pretty deep guy, but asking my grandfather in 1932, to make space for his feelings, you know what I mean? Like there was food to put on the table because daylight, all of those things. So the way that we are able to hold each other is going to look a lot different than it would be 70 years ago. And honestly, that's the trappings of the resistance of people who are now going to be the next boat over the bridge.
I love that. Wow, that's really, really great. When I read that we had all these retrogrades coming up, I was like, oh, I better start my holiday shopping now. I better get all prepared and make rules about holiday topic discussions. But this has been very, very helpful and clarifying. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Oh,
Can you
thank you
tell
guys.
people how they can connect with you and find out more about your services and what you offer?
Sure. So you can find me directly on my website at www.thankgoddess.org. You can also find me in the Moon Lodge group on Patreon, which is patreon.com/Moon Lodge. I write almost daily forecasts as well as work very intensely with all of the members of that program. And I'm very happy to announce that I will be launching an Imramm beginning astrology class again in February of 2025, which that can also be found on my website, as well as the Chrysalis program, which will begin at the equinox of 2025. That is a year-long program where I work one-on-one with people through 24 visits and 4 modules. And this is about transformation, understanding your birth chart. And by the time it's over, I've seen so much transformation in the last 2 cycles that this has really become a labor of love for me. So if that resonates with you, I'm opening the chrysalis. I'm opening the chrysalis to 13 this year, and that all that information will be on my website in a few short days.
Perfect. That sounds wonderful.
Well, this is all really exciting, that it's a time of shift and change, about really looking in the mirror and accepting ourselves for who we are, about getting ready for this transformation that the world is stepping into in a more positive collective. But also it doesn't have to be the media that we're blasted with every day of fear, of doom, of gloom, of insecurity, of instability. And I think that yes, these are all aspects, but free will also comes into play with how you choose to navigate this. So thank
I
you
agree.
very, very much for sharing your base of knowledge. It's amazing.
Well, if I could just say, this holiday season, if there was something to focus on, especially with the retrogrades in terms of holiday shopping, I would really look at community. I would really look at what Christmas was to you as a child, what that felt like, and trying to foster that feeling in the world around you. I know a lot of us love to give gifts in material ways, but giving the gifts of the heart are always timeless.
Yeah. Agreed. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. We hope you have a wonderful week. Please remember, as always, to show up, do great work, and share your light.
Take care.